Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk for a little bit about the Western Conference Finals. We now have the matchup set, and it's going to be between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. It's a very unexpected matchup. I don't know anybody that predicted these two teams facing off here before the season. Even around the trade deadline, a lot of people would have looked at you a bit strange if this is the matchup you picked. But coming to the playoffs, I'm sure there are some people. Even still, though, these are two teams that really weren't supposed to be here. They came into the year with a lot to prove each, and they've proven basically everybody who doubted them wrong. The Timberwolves were thought of as a team that basically had to make some type of noise this year after last season, the first one having Rudy Gobert in town. Didn't exactly go to plan. They dealt with some injuries. The Cat-Gobert frontcourt pairing never worked great. They hardly made the playoffs, although when they got there, they did give the Nuggets a pretty tough first-round series, but in the end, bowed out and kind of had question marks. There were people thinking, oh, should they trade Cat this offseason coming into this year? The thought process was if they didn't show massive improvement, the Wolves were going to be in a really tough spot. And you know it's massive improvement, making your first conference final since Kevin Garnett was in town. As for the Mavericks, this was a year where they were trying to prove that the Kyrie Luka Doncic pairing could work. It could help them be successful and get back to the Western Conference Finals where they were just a few years ago. It didn't look great after the deadline last year. The defense didn't seem to be fantastic. They fell apart, ended up missing the play-in entirely, although they did tank the last few games to make it to that spot, which helped them land Derek Lively. They made some interesting offseason moves, really picked it up around the deadline, adding guys like PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and here they are. They make it through, beating the Clippers in the first round, being the one-seeded Thunder in the second round to face off against this Wolves team who are going to be a big challenge. Anthony Edwards has really risen up to superstardom. Gobert is the decoy. Cat has really been putting it together, having his best playoff run yet. Great role players on both sides. It promises to be an incredible matchup. Even though it wasn't expected, it's one that I'm really excited we're going to get to see. So let's break this one down, starting off with some numbers, then getting into keys to the matchup, and eventually making a prediction. So far through the playoffs, the Wolves have the 6th best offense and 4th best defense with the 2nd net rating, while the Mavericks have the 7th offense and 6th defense with the 6th best net rating. So Minnesota does have a slight edge in all of these categories, but with the playoffs, you know, these teams have played very different opponents, and it's all very matchup dependent. I'm not taking this too much into account. I just do think so far the Wolves, up until this point, have been the slightly more well-rounded team. Much more importantly are the keys to the matchup, and the first one for me, and the obvious one I would imagine, is whether or not the Mavericks can puncture this Timberwolves defense, because Minnesota has one of the best defenses we've seen in a really long time. They just held the Denver Nuggets in a 7-game series to what would have been the worst offensive rating out of any NBA team this season. They held them under 100 a number of times. They had that game 2 without Rudy Gobert on the court, who's the defensive player of the year, where they made the Nuggets basically look like they didn't know how to play basketball. They hound you, they're physical, they have a lot of length, they force turnovers. There's almost no weakness to this Minnesota Timberwolves defense. They are unbelievable on that end. It's going to be a massive challenge for the Mavericks to go ahead and overcome, especially because they're not going to have as many easy corner looks like they got against Oklahoma City. They're not going to have as many easy lob opportunities because with all the size the Mavericks have, they're able to disrupt those, prevent you from even throwing them in the first place. They've got some good defenders to go ahead and throw out guys like Kyrie and Luka. It's going to be a massive task to try and overcome what, at the moment, seems like a nearly insurmountable Wolves defense. However, if there was one duo that could try and break this trend, it may just be Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who've both had really impressive moments in the playoffs so far, although it has been a little bit up and down for each, which brings me to my next key. What version of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are we going to see in this series? Starting off with Luka, up until this point, he hasn't had the typical dominant Luka numbers that we expect in a playoff run. Ever since he first got to the postseason, he's been one of the most unstoppable players in the sport. It's not been a bad playoff run, don't get me wrong. I mean, they're in the Western Conference Finals. Just the numbers haven't been as crazy as they typically are for him. Although I will say, in the final 2 games, specifically against the Thunder, he was unbelievable. Typical Luka stuff. 31 points, 10 rebounds, and 11 assists in Game 5. And in Game 6, 29, 10, and 10, both with pretty good efficiency. Maybe he's getting a little bit healthier. All those injuries that have been lingering that have prevented him from getting to his spots with the way he typically does, from moving the way that he usually does, maybe those are working themselves out a little bit. And if Luka is starting to refine this form, this could be a massive problem for the Wolves, because while they've got a lot of great defenders, when Luka's in the zone, there's basically nobody that can stop him. He's also really good at putting guys in foul trouble, whether it was, Lou Dort in the Thunder series. He can do that again against guys like Jaden McDaniels or Nickeil Alexander-Walker, these players that the Mavericks are going to need to produce at a high level if they want to win this series. If he can get them on the bench with foul issues, that becomes a massive problem for the Wolves. Then you have Kyrie Irving, who was much more of a playmaker than a scorer throughout the Thunder series, but showed the other side versus the Clippers as that scoring guard. I think they're going to need him to be more aggressive, especially in first halves, because against the Thunder, he would often take just a few shots going into halftime, and then the second half really start to turn it up and be more aggressive, which led to the Mavericks being a way better second half team than they were a first half team. It's actually the same case for the Timberwolves. Both of these teams have been way better in the second half than the first half. I think the Mavericks are going to need Kyrie Irving to come out the gate firing and looking to attack, especially because, according to Anthony Edwards himself after the Timberwolves won Game 7, Ant is going to be guarding Kyrie Irving. So if Kyrie is just playing passively and not really trying to attack too much, he's letting Ant off the hook. Maybe Kyrie could try and get Edwards in some foul trouble, at the very least tire him out a little bit on that defensive end, so offensively he's not able to destroy you the way that he has basically everybody so far throughout the playoffs. If you just let him chill and aren't very aggressive, it's going to become a problem. I think the offense can get stagnant, and you can't afford that against this Minnesota team. And speaking of Ant, the next key I had is, can the Mavericks slow down Anthony Edwards? Against the Thunder, the biggest problem for the Mavericks was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who went out there and torched them for 32 points per game on great efficiency, also had 7.3 assists. They stopped basically everybody else from contributing in a big way, but Shai was a massive problem. Anthony Edwards, like Shai, is one of the best scorers in the world. So far throughout the playoffs, he's putting up 29, 6, and 6 on 50, 40, 84 splits, and that's with insane shot making and every team knowing he is the guy. That is the player they have to worry about, the guy they have to try and stop. Denver did everything they could. They threw a bunch of defenders at him. It just never really mattered. Phoenix couldn't do anything, and they were a team that had massive success against Ant in the regular season. He's just leveled up to a new stratosphere. Whoever's guarding him has to prevent him from catching a rhythm. You can't let him get any easy looks. Whether it's Derrick Jones Jr., it's PJ Washington, it's Kyrie Irving. They've got a bunch of interesting defenders they can throw at him. It's just a matter of if it's actually going to matter because of how good he is. They've got to try to find a way to slow him down, though. Maybe you do have to double like they didn't do against Shai. Maybe they send multiple guys to Anthony Edwards. But the problem is, Ant has become a lot better at playmaking out those double teams. He's making the right reads a lot of times, like in Game 7 against Denver. Although he shot terribly, they're sending a bunch of double teams his way, and he still found ways to set up his teammates, which is especially a problem because, unlike with the Thunder, the Timberwolves supporting players outside of Anthony Edwards, I imagine, are going to be a lot more reliable. Which brings me to my next key. Which of the role players are going to maintain their play? Because the reason both these teams are here, in addition to their stars, are their supporting casts. For the Timberwolves, can Jaden McDaniels, Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid, guys like that continue to knock down shots the way they did against Denver, the way that they were able to against Phoenix to go ahead and get that sweep, especially in the final two games, like Game 6 and 7. Jaden McDaniels was arguably the best player for the Timberwolves a lot of those moments. Karl-Anthony Towns in Game 7 was huge. While Ant couldn't score, he was going out there being aggressive, attacking mismatches. That's something they're really going to need him to continue to do. Anthony Edwards is the head of the snake, but they need everybody to contribute as well. And this is a really good Mavericks defense. Like, this is easily the biggest challenge the Wolves are going to have faced on the defensive end so far. Can they maintain their high-level offensive play? Because they had a lot of issues offensively in the regular season, stuff that left a lot of people concerned coming into the playoffs, but they've cut down on some of their turnovers. They've executed a lot better in the clutch. Haven't often had those stagnant moments the way they had in the regular season, but against the great Mavericks defense, they need guys to go ahead and step up more than ever, even outside of Anthony Edwards. On the other side for the Mavericks, the reason they were able to dispatch the Thunder was because of guys like PJ Washington, who was unbelievable. He was most nights their most consistent scorer, knocking down basically any open look the Thunder gave him, attacking mismatches. Derrick Jones Jr. hit some absurd shots against the Thunder as well. I'll never forget that crazy turnaround bucket he had in the closing minutes of Game 6. Derek Lively was fantastic, had by far the best plus-minus out of anybody in that series. They need him to continue to be that high-level finisher around the rim. Daniel Gafford wasn't great against the Thunder. Lively was definitely definitely the better big, but they're going to need Gafford going up against all the size that Minnesota has. Guys are going to have to maintain their play. Even Josh Green had some really good minutes knocking down a lot of threes. They need those guys to continue to produce at a high level. And honestly, this matchup may just come down to which role players outperform the others. Those are my biggest keys to this series. There's, of course, a lot more minute details that we could go into, but overall, those are the main talking points. And now I want to go ahead and get into a prediction. This is right off the bat going to be another amazing Western Conference playoff series. We've gotten some really good ones so far, and I don't think it stops here. Both teams have been through a lot up to this point, have shown a lot on both sides of the ball, a ton of star power, whether it's Luka, it's Kyrie, it's Ant, it's Cat, it's Gobert, high-level role players all over the place. And really at the centerpiece of this all is it's a chance for Luka or Ant to really begin to stake their claim in the Western Conference. One of them is going to have a finals appearance on their resume at this point, and I think with that on the line, I expect both of these lead stars to really rise to the occasion. I honestly think this could go either way. I'm kind of split on it as I'm here recording this, but I think with everything I've thought about, I'm going to go ahead and take the Minnesota Timberwolves to win this series in 7 games. Beating the Nuggets was a really impressive feat for Minnesota, and they've shown me a lot throughout this run. That defense in particular, I keep harping on it, but it's unbelievably good. It's a unit that I think has a lot of potential to slow down this Mavericks backcourt and the offense as a whole. That length is a big problem, and I think they're going to be better at preventing the role players from popping off than OKC was, which was a big reason why the Mavericks were able to go ahead and win. Also, Luka seems to be playing healthier, but I do still have concerns about those nagging injuries that are bothering him. And if you thought him going up against Lou Dort was a grueling task, now he's going to face this Minnesota defense that gives everybody fits. They're going to be on him consistently for 48 minutes every single second he's out there. He's hardly going to get any breathing room. So I think with that being in play, I would imagine he might not have his best series, although it's Luka Doncic. He can do basically anything at this point, it feels like. You've also got more size on the Wolves front. And I do think the Maxi Kleber injury is still something I'm concerned about with the Mavericks. There is a chance he returns in this series, I believe, but he definitely won't be here to start. Takes away some of their versatility with their big rotation, especially being able to go more perimeter centric and open up the game, which is going to allow a guy like Rudy Gobert to stay more down low and affect the game the way that he does, which is playing as the best rim protector in the world. I think Minnesota just also has more depth at the moment, specifically with that Kleber injury affecting the Mavericks taken into account. I don't feel great either way, to be honest. I've seen a lot of people say that the Mavericks just don't have a chance right off the bat. They're already counting them out. I'm not going to count out Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Kyrie's, of course, got that championship pedigree. Luka is the best player in this series. Maybe they're enough to go ahead and make this thing happen, but I think I trust Minnesota a little bit more at this point. I'm a little bit more impressed, I guess, with what I've seen from them so far. I think this could go either way. It's kind of a coin flip, but I'm going to take the Minnesota Timberwolves to go ahead and win this. Ant's going to have an amazing series. I think Cat is ready for the challenge after what I saw him do in Game 7. Trust their supporting cast a little bit more. I think they'll rise to this occasion and go ahead and make the first NBA Finals in Minnesota Timberwolves history. With all that being said, those are my thoughts on this series. Let me know down below in the comments who you have winning and in how many games, who are your biggest X factors. What are your keys to the series? What are some stuff that I didn't even mention in this that you're taking a look at going into the matchup? As well as what are your thoughts on the Eastern Conference Finals? I didn't get a chance to make a full preview and breakdown of that because I just ran out of time. There's been a lot going on for me personally, in addition to, of course, the NBA playoffs moving pretty quickly here. I can't believe we're already at the conference finals. But if you want my prediction, I've got Celtics in 5. I just think they're too much for the Pacers to overcome. Although I could see Indiana forcing like 6 games. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. But yeah, those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Helps the channel out a lot. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.